We can go.
She's been sitting here.
Everybody, we can go. Yay! Right, good afternoon. Yay! Right. I'd like to start off this afternoon's session from the perspective of a simple man who wants access to the good things in life. I accept that there's a personal data value exchange. I provide access to my data to receive access to goods and services. However, I grant this access on the understanding that my data and personal privacy will be protected by the organisations that I share it with. However, just how seriously do organisations take the security of our data? And how seriously do they consider just what they're going to use that data for? When they prioritise security, does this impact business objectives and consequently customer service? What tensions exist within organisations regarding the ethical use of our data and the security of that data and the commercial needs of the business? And finally, why are there so many publicised data breaches? Acknowledgement to Ian. Is it more cost-effective for organisations to accept the hit in terms of fines and censure for data breaches rather than provide the significant investment required to collect, store and protect our data properly in the first place? Joining me, I am delighted to say, are four superstars of the Scottish data and tech scene who are here today to debate all of this and more. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Adam Sroka.
Hi, thanks very much, Robin. I'm Adam Sroka, co-founder of Hypercube Consulting. I've been a data and AI professional for a good 8-10 years now. We do data and AI for the energy sector, which is really critical, actually, national critical infrastructure. So security becomes quite important. And yeah, we get into all the quirks of smart meter data and things like that. It can get really interesting. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Big hand for Adam. Dr. Zibby Kwecka.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon. I'm Zibby. I just changed the titles on Monday, so I'm still getting to grips of how I should introduce myself. So I'll go to my default. When I usually present, I talk about myself as Forrest Gump of Scottish cyber. The reason for it is I've been pretty much everywhere in the Scottish cyber industry. I've been to multiple banks. I've been to multiple, organizations that shape cybersecurity in Scotland, including companies that many people forget about called DNS that become SecureWorks and so on. Plenty of them. I'm now a CISO for a UK-wide organization that is quite well known, and I just started on Monday, so at the moment I'm still keeping it under wraps. Wish me luck, please, and hopefully this talk gonna go well. The reason I'm talking here, I actually done a PhD on privacy investigation, privacy preserving investigation, and that was heavily based on Data Protection Act and actually repository of investigatory powers. Now I'm gonna shut up, give it back to Rob.
Big hand for Zibby. Jude McCorry.
My name is Jude McCorry. I'm the CEO for the Cyber and Fraud Centre. Previous to that, I worked with Rhona, who is a data superstar. I'm not. And she can talk about what she does. But so I've got a really good interest in data and cybersecurity.
Big hand for Jude. And Rhona MacLennan.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Rhona MacLennan. So I'm the lead data consultant with Fourth Point Analytics. We are a Edinburgh headquartered data and AI consultancy. I joined there last year, having worked with Jude previously at the Data Lab. My interest is more in the foundations of data, getting the data management and the data governance and everything in place, and I've been working for more than the last 20 years in that space.
Big hand for Rhona. Now, MBN Solutions have been fortunate enough to run a panel session at Digit Expo for a few years now. Can you put your hand in the air, please, if this is the first time you've attended one of our panel sessions? Okay, we have one rule. This is collaborative. My job is to get the ball rolling with some kicker questions and some jazz hands. Your job as an audience is to pick up that ball and run with it, so we have a great debate. Are you with me? Yes. Come on, are you with me? Yes. Right, let's get started. Here we go. Question number 1 to Jude. Jude, what strategies and best practices can organisations employ to protect sensitive data and avoid data breaches while continuing to extract value from their data assets?
I think the first thing is not really a strategy. The first thing is basically probably the ethical side of it, to be a good custodian of the data that's entrusted to you. So we have seen lots of organisations that haven't been those good custodians. For example, we had the Capita breach. I don't know, has anybody been affected by the Capita breach? So any pension companies? Or,
I have actually.
yeah, so have I. And you know, to see it from that side, that all you get is a letter to say you've been affected, that's not very good custodians of your data. They've got your PRSI number, they've got all your pension data, they've got your banking details, they've got your date of birth, all the things that they needed to set up your pension they have, and the hackers have, and it's probably on the dark web and everything now as well. So that's one of the things to think about. You've been entrusted with the data of millions of people, so how do you be a good custodian of that? The other thing, not really a strategy, but instill a good, healthy cyber culture around the whole of the organisation. Cyber should not just be with the IT organisation or the IT side of the business to run. It should be everybody's. Basically, it should be a team sport. Everybody should have part to play in it. So look at things around staff training. Also exercising, so as any public sector organisations here, we do the free exercise in a box, the NCSC exercise in a box sessions that anyone can join, and it basically puts you through your paces for any vulnerabilities in the organisation. Also things like vulnerability testing, how vulnerable are you as an organisation, and things like pen testing as well, so for the larger organisations. Incident response, make sure you've got an excellent incident response plan that is current, that people's mobile phone numbers are up to date, people's names, people's, people are still in the organisation that are on that piece of paper. Make sure you've got the piece of paper printed out and at home with you as well, because most of these attacks happen at weekends, Good Friday and Christmas Day, or New Year's or Christmas Eve. And also test your incident response plan as well. There's no point in having one if you haven't tested to see how good it is whenever you are under pressure.
Thank you very much. Any other panel members like to run with that one? Looking at the strategies and best practices that can be employed to protect sensitive data?
I would just obviously add the kind of cliched information security now, because we say it so much. So let's add it to privacy. Find out what data you've got. Find out what you've got, where you've got it, and what you're doing about it. And I think that's the core we've done.
Backups as well.
Oh yes.
Quite a few people have been caught out in that one in the last few months as well. Make sure your backups are working and you're testing them as well.
Okay, Adam, Rhona, anything to add on that one?
I think a lot of the things, when you hear them after the event, it's all common sense.
Yeah.
So it's all common sense that almost gets pushed to the bottom. Oh, that's fine, we've got a plan. But as Jude was saying, if that plan isn't tested, it's just a bit of paper. And actually, whenever I've been, years ago, I worked with oil and gas, and it was more response to incidents and how you contacted the relatives of those involved and things like that. And they used to test those really rigorously on a regular basis, because it was their day-to-day staff who had to be the people who phoned the relatives to let them know there had been an incident on a platform or something like that. And the only way they felt they could support their staff to do that difficult job was to train it regularly. So every company would have a test maybe twice a year or something like that. And I think even quarterly would seem reasonable for something like this, where the market's moving so quickly, the types of attack are changing all the time. So your response really needs to be agile enough to cope with that, and not something somebody wrote 2 years ago and that person's now left the company and away somewhere else.
Yeah.
Back to that idea that the value exchange and that trust, and you've spoken about common sense. From an organisational perspective, is this common sense? Is this what happens within the majority of organisations? Are these sensible moves taking place regularly, or are we right to be mistrustful?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we test how many times do we test our fire plans? How many people have got yellow jackets hanging around their offices for fire plans? I don't see people with their instant response plans somewhere. I don't see organisations testing their instant response plan for a cyber attack. A lot of people work at home now, so we don't really need to test our fire alarm as much, but we still do that rigorously because organisations have to do it. I'd love to see some sort of standard in organisations saying, right, we're going to do a test around our instant response every quarter or every 6 months or something.
And I think, like, on that theme, just to me, it's always like a people piece as well. Like, do the people in your organisation, do they actually care about it? Don't let it turn into like the 600 slide DSE video that you've got to do just because HR are on your back, right? Because then the people in your organisation aren't going to care about data and privacy and protection. I think it needs an active sort of champion from leadership, and then the culture needs to be brought along with it, that this is really important. What is the impact to our ultimate end user when this goes wrong, and why should you care about key fobs and lanyards and all this stuff?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key there, Adam. It's the example needs to go from the top, and the business model of organization also needs to be clear. If your organization is not making money from selling personal records, don't sell personal records and take care of them. If you have business model where you're making money from personal records, then that should be even more protected. That it means that you're collecting more than you should be on day-to-day basis based on consent from people. So you shouldn't be, exploiting these people by not telling them, how you're treating the data and where that data goes.
Okay. As we were speaking earlier on, we were talking about frameworks as checklists.
Yeah.
Yep. Are there specific regulations and legal frameworks that you believe strike that right balance between data privacy and business interests? Where could they be improved?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and obviously because my journey with privacy started when it wasn't really that popular. 2006, when I started kind of looking at the subject of privacy and how we protect it. How can we actually investigate somebody? How can a police officer or somebody, a detective go to a bank, for example, and request my data without telling the bank, my name? So obviously they can treat me differently once they know I'm investigated, so on. So I started being a bit obsessed with privacy then. And I thought, I then look at the Data Protection Act 1998, and you know what? It was very good. If you read Data Protection Act 1998, it's a great act telling you the principles of how to treat personal records in order for that processing of those records to be fair to the data subject. And if people would, out of their goodwill, the CEOs of your companies and the data expert within the companies follow those principles, we wouldn't have that many problems. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, obviously. And I will, ask for a little kind of audience participation in here. Hopefully, did somebody here heard about e-privacy directive that is called the cookie law? Hands up. You heard about cookie law. Now I'll ask 3 dates. Was it introduced in 2021? No hands. 2012? No hands. 2018? I see some hands there. I know it's a hard one. Not many hands up. That's the 3 dates. Think for yourself. Was the cookie directive introduced 2012, 18, or 21? Everybody, in my mind, it was introduced in 2018. But it wasn't. It was introduced in 2012. But until the regulator had, the scary fines to put on somebody, nobody cared about it. That's why our collective memory is that everybody started caring about the e-privacy directive and cookie law in 2018. It was actually, already active for 6 years. So that just shows us that it's not always about the laws and the regulations being there. It's about people following them and people knowing how to follow it. And I will ask one more question. I'm sorry.
That's all right, mate.
Hopefully you will participate, at least in your head. You don't have to participate actively by raising your hand, but if you do, please do. And don't worry, it's an open, only we are recorded. Your faces are not recorded. So, GDPR, or otherwise Data Protection Act 2018, does it require encryption of data at rest? Put the hands up now if you think no. About maybe 20%. And GDPR, does it require data to be encrypted at rest? Yes?
Depends if it's stored on paper or on a computer.
That's a good question. Yes?
Because people covered by GDPR and they don't have a computer.
Yeah, I fully agree, all means. But I will tell you that if you actually read GDPR, it says EG encryption. And in 2018, every single lawyer I knew said, did you implement encryption? And you didn't have to. No. You need to decide on your own what are the right means of implementing security and implementing privacy. And I think where I'm going with that is actually, yes, laws can be better. We tried to get GDPR better. We tried, Data Protection Act was good, then GDPR came in, and Data Protection Act 2018, they came in. They're better, they're more descriptive because they need to be, because people found ways to ignore the principles that were already good. However, they're still leaving quite a lot of leeway for people to decide what is right and wrong technical measure of protecting data. And the way to get better at it, I think there are two suggestions I would say right now, is going similar to what we've done with energy and efficiency labels, where we actually have a category from A to E. How good is that device, my fridge, or anything else using electricity? If it doesn't use electricity that much, it's got A++ rating. I want my services to have A++ rating in security and privacy. If I could have a label like that as a person on, making my choices, am I going to go with platform A or B? It will definitely skew my choice there. Yeah. And the second thing, and I'll finish just now, my second thing is it's actually the privacy professionals and security professionals, and anybody calling themselves a consultant or doing a review, they should make sure that they know what they're talking about before advising people on those matters. There was a lot of things done in 2019 that were vendors and consultants, and sorry I said lawyers before, it's not only about lawyers. It was vendors and consultants that went on that bandwagon of, yeah, we need to sell GDPR services. GDPR services, doesn't matter we haven't trained people about it or given them time to learn about it, we need to sell GDPR services. Let's change that approach. Let's train people first before we actually make something mandated. So yeah, that's my point of view.
Cool. Anybody, anything else to add on that particular one before we kind of throw it open? No? Okay. Time for the audience. A couple of questions. Anybody got a question on any of the stuff that we've discussed so far? Yes. Anybody? Got mics at the back? Yep. Centre. Do you want to wait for the mic to come over? We've got a mic.
You can shout.
No, the mic will help with the recording.
Sorry. Hello. So can we take the conversation back to the Capita breach, which I know nothing about, I'm not involved in at all. If so that's happened, and the implication, there was an implication which was, I got a letter, and there was almost an implication there that Capita might have been unethical, they've not done something right. If we now had the ability to peel back the onion and actually see what they did before, and see what the breach was, if we found that they'd done everything right and followed all the guidelines, who's at fault? Is it us for giving them the data? Or is it for them? Or is it for their insurers? Who is now at fault if we find that they've done everything right against the standards we're talking about?
There's one point even before a Capita point is we didn't give our data to Capita, we gave our data to organisations who then gave it to Capita. I didn't sign anything to say to forward, so that to me, that's the first point of the custodians of the data is I didn't say to Edinburgh University or whatever, to the pensions company, I don't know who it was, that they could then forward my data, and that's my point around even that. It doesn't have to be a technical thing, it's the people side of things as well. You're making decisions, just because there's a lot of data, it doesn't mean, you have to basically drill down, what does that data mean for you to take it, but also for the organisation who we've given all our data to just hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah. So who would you then approach if you wanted to be compensated for it? Is the person you've gone to first?
So I think it'll all come out in the wash in the next, it'll be the next PPI scandals, because it will be, my data has been breached, but and people, the minute another breach happens, people go, oh, my data's been breached. You get the adverts in the paper as well. Have you been breached by Capita? Have you been, send in your details? But you have to basically say how it's
sharing your details with now?
Yeah, good point.
Sorry?
And you've just answered an advert in the paper, right, to share your details with whom?
Yeah, but you're not giving your bank details. You're giving your name and address.
And the fact that you were in Capita's database.
They will know, but also they will be contacting you as well. If the data's on the dark web as well, there's a lot of ways people can get that data.
No, I'm just pointing out that there is potentially
contradiction here in following up with these lawyers, chasing up, and you're giving them information as well as in a way to try and complain about somebody else who's got access to your information.
Yeah, and it's a vicious circle. You may not even give that data. You may contact somebody in the press. It might be the Daily Record, it might be in the Sun, or somebody contacts you even before you get the chance of seeing the advert. You could be contacted to say, have you, your details could be sold to try and sell you something. Your details could be sold to set up a loan for you and everything like that as well. But a lot of the time, nothing has happened. So we've had quite a few breaches that nobody's had any calls to say that loans have been set up. So you have to basically tell them how it's affected you. There's so many times that our data has been given out to all around the world. How many people have got an iWatch? How many people have got some sort of Garmin? If you're giving your data away every single day, you've got that choice. So it's not. So but I decided to fill in that form. I wanted a pension. I went to that company to do it. So it is our data. We were talking earlier on about what the price is for giving that data away. But the man asked about the legal repercussions. It'll have to be regulated, even how we basically sue people for using our data. Yeah. And also the ICO, they are the people that will give we spoke about it earlier on, saying we will charge you X amount because you had a data breach, and this is the fine you're going to have to pay. That fine doesn't go out to us. We don't get £150 or £200 because that's never, I think there will be a huge revolution in this in the next few months, that it just goes back into the public purse. It doesn't go back in to try and help organisations or even public sector to be more secure. That's where I'd like to see those fines going to people like the Western Isles and stuff who don't have money to spend on cybersecurity. Everybody has got public sector pressures on spending. So it's things like that yes, they've had a breach, but did they have the money to spend on protecting themselves?
That's an interesting philosophical question. So would it be better to allow breaches to happen so that the fines will occur and then you'll get the money so that you can fix it?
But you don't get the money.
No, sorry, you were proposing a change.
Yeah.
So if that change does happen, and now the way the money is collected, it becomes available to the organisations to fix the problem, does that not become an incentive to have breaches? Or would that not become?
There'll always be incentives to have breaches. Okay. No matter what we come up with, there'll always be incentives.
I like by saying, so even though you've either been personally impacted by it already and you don't know, or you do know, or in the future you'll be impacted by it, is it actually a good thing that this has happened because regulation will come in? I think yes, although you're personally affected. Do you? Is it good that it's happened because now we realise it's a problem?
That's a very open question as well. Is it good that it's happened?
It's good that it's public.
No, it's good that it's public.
Right,
exactly.
Good way of putting it.
Because there's a lot of breaches that happen that we don't know anything about. So the electoral roll breach, for example, that happened 2 years before we found out that happened. And again,
it's too late. It's too late 2 years.
It's not banking details, but it is our whatever details you have to fill in. I can't remember what you have to fill in for it. So there's so many breaches that has happened that a lot of our data will be out there already.
Like we've seen recently, like with NCSC, it's like attribution and just bring these people to justice and take them down. Use the money for that.
The hackers.
Yeah.
They're not regulated companies. They're not.
So they're not.
They're
in jail. They're not hacking it.
But there's not very many of them in jail, is there, Zibby?
No, so we also have to realize that a lot of hackers will be based in countries that don't do extraditions. There are going to be a lot of hackers that are based in Russia, because right now that's probably doing exactly what Korea has done before, and North Korea has supported the GDPR. Sorry, GDP. Too much talk about GDPR. GDP. They supported the GDP with money from hacking. And so definitely it will change. I will hand over to Radek in a second here, but I was just going to say on the same point that it was quite interesting. What didn't happen in UK and did not happen in the States but happened in some Eastern European countries, that when GDPR went in force, there were people reporting companies for breaches of the rules, and even hackers reporting companies for breaches of the rules. And that's what we're gonna see very soon.
This
now
week there was one.
With SEC, that's already started happening in the States, where the hackers actually reported a company to SEC, and that's gonna start a spiral. That's gonna be quite interesting to see with a new type of ransom, actually. But anyway, sorry.
No,
Yes, you've
question
got
from here?
serious and organised criminals trying to regulate the industry.
Or basically, they found a new way to get money.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Radek Gąsiorek. I work for no one, just myself. Sorry, I'm quite passionate about this, so I just want to throw in my stuff. Jude's data was breached. She's the victim. I almost feel like she needed to explain herself. So that's first comment. Like, to me, it's completely black and white. There's nothing to discuss. And another comment: if you drive through Edinburgh Road, there's a hole in the road. You fall into it. You could get Edinburgh Council to the court and get your car fixed. If your data gets breached, the same way is the organization's fault. There's, for me, no gray area. And often they just make these decisions conscious, business decision to be open. Because someone said before, it is just cheaper not to care. Thank you.
Yeah, it's cheaper sometimes to pay the fine to the ICO than to spend money on products and cybersecurity.
And I suppose
Sometimes or always.
so that's an
Depends
interesting.
on the size of the company.
That's where it comes to privacy. The difference between obviously I'm passionate about both security and privacy, and the difference between the two: security is what the companies care for because it's their data and their security. Privacy, you need to entice them to care. There are some that care because they got the right heart and the right mind, and there are some that only care because there are fines at the back of it.
Okay, I'm going to move things on a little bit here, and this one's to Adam. Adam, in the era of machine learning, data science, artificial intelligence, all that good stuff that we're used to nowadays, how can organisations ensure that data security and privacy measures keep pace with these technological advancements?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've actually got a question related to the previous point in a similar vein. It's really hard, and I think it needs to be an active stance. Often people take the blanket statement that just be super defensive and block innovation, block pace of change and delivery, and that can actually cause more problems because you get people writing like their super complicated password at the back of their notebook that they carry on with them every day, things like that. We've all seen it, right? It happens everywhere. You've got 15 special characters and all this, and it's stuff you can't remember, so it just circumvents itself, these kinds of internal rules. I think it needs to be an active stance, and I think for new things come up, like organisations need to put the effort in to deeply understand it. I was engaging with a researcher on LinkedIn who's doing basically prompt engineering hacks for ChatGPT, and he managed to download people's resumes with their addresses because you might not be aware, but any document you send to it, it's added to the training set and it's within the terms of service, and other people can just go and download the stuff contracts.
Can you click a button and say do not add to the training set? I actually don't use ChatGPT.
Definitely the paid versions you can. I'm not sure whether the free ones you can. I can't remember. But definitely if you're using the paid subscription, you can do it, yes. And you should.
And is that button linked to anything? Or is it a feel-good button? Like, how do you know, right? So the point being, this researcher said it was very easy actually to download people's resumes and some other really quite scary data from it. And so think about that, right? Everyone's excited by it. Everything's ChatGPT now. All the blog posts you read will be. But has anyone put the time and effort in to really think about, well, what does that mean? And there's the bigger case studies of like Samsung losing a load of IP to Microsoft because they were using ChatGPT to write code and things like that. So I think organisations really need to, the pace of change in this space is going to really accelerate, and I think it needs to be an active stance. And I'm always obsessed with the people and cultural element of it. If you aren't taking like the team on the journey with you, you are just going to fail. One of the questions just out the back of the conversation that was had there, and I'm thinking back to like Mark Zuckerberg sat in front of the Senate, right? Do you think that the people writing these bits of legislation which take a long time to get approved and go through, are they primed, or are they getting the right advice to understand exactly what is happening and write the right stuff?
So I think, sorry, would you like to take?
Rhona can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways they are. Sometimes coming to a problem like this slightly away from the hype and thinking about it a different way is how really good legislation can come through. Will it ever be fast enough? I don't know. Are we going to get to a point where they actually use ChatGPT to help them write their legislation? But that's maybe a wormhole we don't want to go down. But, for me, having different people involved, having different types of thought, my concern is, as we've seen so often in tech, it's the hype that kills us. So we're doing it because we really want to, and it's really interesting and fascinating, and we just dive in headlong because it's so exciting. And then the problems come down the line when you've probably moved on to the next exciting thing, and it's the people in the more mundane roles that it touches that are having to sweep up the pieces. And people talk about unintended consequences. It is unintended, but it's also just not thought about consequences. So for me, bringing people in and people with lived experience that are going to be impacted by whatever it is you're doing is really, really important. I mean, ChatGPT's just gone mad. This exponential is almost exponential the last few months. So that's a difficult one. The world has fundamentally changed, but the problems are still the same. And we have to tackle these really big core problems and collectively.
If you've got 2 minutes, I could add to that as well. You ask a great question, are the legislations right? I gave examples of Data Protection Act 1998 because I liked it. It was a very good piece of legislation that was very open to interpretation, but for the people that wanted to do it right, they could do it right. It was a guide how to do it right. Then GDPR came in place that was a bit more strict, but it's still a good piece of regulation that any of you can read. If you haven't read it yourself, just go and read it. It's very easy to read, very easy to follow. There is not that many technicalities there. Honestly, you just have to spend a lot of time doing it.
Okay, we believe you.
I have read it, so I do agree with you.
Yes, it's a big book, but it's easy to read. It's like J.K. Rowling, kind of thing. And no cancel or anything here. I'm just talking about the writing.
You can give it.
Yeah, we can organize PDFs. But there is a lot of other legislations or security policies, privacy policies in the organizations. When you look at them, they've got first of all, they're very technology focused. They're very focused about that's how we do it. So we need that separation of, legislation or policy on high level that talks, these are the rules that you should kind of obey on high level. That's how to behave right. And then we've got standards that actually tell you how to do it in a given scenario. You can't try to put those two things together because you will always end up in a scenario where you're putting things too specific in a policy that will not mean anything in a year or two and may already not mean something to a different industry than you were thinking about when you were writing the regulation. So that's the thing. And, okay. 1 second more. We're talking a lot about ChatGPT because it's now consuming that much data. But talking about a lot of examples you gave, the same thing was happening with Grammarly. People were copying and pasting everything, like, oh, I'm writing that letter to the customer. I just gonna copy it to Grammarly because Grammarly gonna tell me how to write it. Yeah. Obviously, when you done it, and it was about that tick box, Grammarly, by default, anything that is in Grammarly, they own the copyrights for it. So they also own, they could process the data, and they did process the data. So that was another one.
Rhona,
I think also for ChatGPT, just because things are available doesn't mean you have to jump and you have to use it. So I work with very bright technical people. Is any of my team in here before I start telling tales?
Make the bread, we'll see them.
Yeah, so they themselves, so our head of ethical hacking, Declan Doyle, if you know him, so he introduced ChatGPT to we do a weekly update, so people are out and about and stuff. So then they started using the Irish style ChatGPT, the cowboy style, Wild West, it was Indians, all this kind of nonsense that if you didn't know what was going on in the organisation, you definitely didn't know. So, and then people come to me going, what did that mean? It was very funny on a Friday night for me to sit there and laugh, ha 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 ha, but this is our communication, this is our way of communicating. Then it seeped into the board report. So I got the board report for the last board report, and it was like everybody did their update to the board that had to do for a team thing. And I was like, what the hell is that? I'm the CEO of the company, and I don't know. So it was like, so I banned it. I said, that's it. And they were all nearly crying. They're like, you can't just ban it. I said, come back, convince me in the areas of the business where you want to use it.
Yeah.
But don't think that you're going to then, you've got a board report to do. That doesn't sound like you. That's not the way you write. That's nothing got to do with us. And okay, the cowboy style and stuff might be funny, but I don't think the board are going to find that funny. So.
Rhona, just that point there about how should organisations approach consent mechanisms for collection of data and the storage of the data and that usage? Are there some innovative approaches that ensure both informed and meaningful consent?
Yeah, I mean, I think any consent, it's all about being transparent and clear around, what it is you're wanting, why you're going to gather that information and be comprehensive, but also explain it in plain language. Yeah. I think for me, it's, and you see it with the cookie law that you mentioned before. It's either yes or no, or you still see the odd example. I saw one the other day where it was a mandatory field that you say yes, they're going to send you a newsletter, although it makes it look like it's optional. So being open and clear, but I think there are a number of different ways where just engaging with people, having that user-friendly interface. I think innovatively there's a lot. It's been driven off the back of GDPR. It's been run for 5-6 years, but taking a much more human-centric view to approach. There's a company called, an organisation called J-Link that are working in this space around, you've got, I can grant access to my data, but it's only held in that one place, and it's then a data exchange between all the people. So rather than every time I sign up for a new insurance policy or a new whatever, I have to fill in all my details. Yeah. I make a contract with that organisation, and they can access the certain fields that I've opened up on my personal record that they need, so that I don't give them anything more than permission to see anything more than they need for the transaction that I'm undertaking. And there's a real growing impetus for that, because it seems like a sensible way where this challenge could be solved. Yeah. I think the other thing I saw, actually, was at the Data Summit that was recently here. There was one of the speakers, and forgive me, I've forgotten her name, but her book was around privacy. And a big thing that is part of that is having an expiry date. So there is you have it for a certain period of time, and there is genuinely a process in place that has to then remove that date. I mean, how do you 100% ever get rid of data, but there's actions there, because a lot of the breaches are things that are sitting around that aren't really active data sets, so they get less care and attention, and that's when they're more vulnerable to attack. So I think there's a number of things like that. So having that expiry element, educating your both your staff and the people within that, so it's going to foster trust across the board. But every breach, trust takes a long time to build up, and you lose it in a second. So it's that, to Zibby's point earlier about, I would go for the A++ rated platform or organisation. So what can we get that's equivalent to maybe the kite mark that you've got in safety? Years ago, I used to talk about having a data warehouse in an organisation, and it had kite marked data within it. So that was the data that all the organisation wanted to use, because they trusted it, rather than what the guy in finance had in an Excel under his armpit. So there's that aspect, and I think for me that's the same way. And there's technologies out there like not blockchain per se, but some of the same technology elements that give you that chain of interaction that can track that, and I think could play a role in this space as well.
Thank you. I'm just looking at any of the organising people in here. Are we getting kicked out at 22? Is it a hard stop?
A little bit,
yeah. Oh, right. One more question from the audience, from somebody who's maybe not asked one yet, please. Anybody got a question? Because we're getting kicked out soon.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, it's possibly a bit of a rambling question here.
We'll try and make it not rambling, because we're going to get kicked out, mate.
Where we've had legislation and controls in place, say around food, production of food, manufacturing of food, that's been in place for a very long time. We still see failures there. Yeah. We still see in the media, we had the big Findus scandal a few years ago. How can we expect something as agile in development and adopted by so many people, where they don't pay any attention to what they're actually doing, to actually manage to be controlled properly when everybody's trying to make money from it?
In 10 seconds, who wants to go for that?
I'll have a go. I think for me it's the combination of carrot and stick, and getting that balance right. So it can't all be stick. I think because then you really have to have the regulation in place. So it's like, how can you incentivise companies to make that investment? So a bit of carrot for them, but then enough of a stick that if they don't do it, so it's a balance, and it'll be different in different industries because of the needs of this particular data. But that's the balance that I think needs to be struck.
Yeah, and I would just say you already gave an example where that's happening. Why don't we just copy it? And to a certain point where things like that work usually, it's when the industry tries to self-regulate itself. So people actually trust it and use the products more. PCI DSS is a great example. Again, GDPR people, PCI DSS, another great standard that people don't like. But actually it was created by Visa and MasterCard and a number of funding and basically a card processors, card brands, So the card brands created PCI DSS for themselves to make sure that they can actually check that merchants that didn't have to care about data that much, so shops are compliant. And we can do exactly the same in privacy. We just have to follow that step. You don't always have to have a regulator breathing down your neck.
Jude, final thoughts?
And that, I don't know anything about that question. So
Adam.
I'm trying to check what I'm on next. You just completely caught me.
Anything? No, right. Folks, if you don't mind, a big hand for Dr. Adam, Dr. Zibby, Jude and Rhona.